A compelling, gripping story. Billionaires, media dynasties, tycoons. And it all matters. A boardroom battle. A battle too for control of Ireland's largest private media group.
Denis O'Brien paints it that the O'Reillys have it in for him.
He was unhappy with the coverage that he received over the Moriarty Tribunal, etc. And he wanted to say, look, I'm going to nail you guys for this. And if I've got the financial muscle to take your company from you, then I'll do that.
It's a major issue in every country as to who has control of the media.
Today, the son, Gavin, followed the father, Tony, off the board of the family company, a dynasty undone at Ireland's largest media group, Independent News and Media.
It's a really, really significant day. You know, there's a lot of stories about media, or media talking about media, but this is a really important day. The O'Reillys have, and Indo have been inextricably linked for decades. Gavin O'Reilly himself has worked at Independent News Media since his mid-20s. He's worked there for 20 years, and his father before him. And days like this, when Independent News and Media edges closer to new ownership, are really pretty extraordinary.
So we know that Gavin O'Reilly has gone, but what we don't know is where Denis O'Brien, the company's largest shareholder and the owner of a string of radio stations, where he fits into this unfolding story.
He's been edging towards getting control of the Independent now for a good few years, but the final push does seem to be on at the moment. He's now the largest shareholder. He has 22% of the company, and he, you know, has lost some boardroom battles, but there are signs that he's winning a few more now at this stage. So the end game may well be in sight.
The boardroom battle has been bitter, it's been personal, and it's also been played out in public. In recent weeks, as the tension has mounted between the two sides, we've seen a series of stories in Independent News and Media titles about Denis O'Brien, about his businesses, his media plan, and his relationship with the Moriarty Tribunal. Coalition split over O'Brien's plans. Act now on Tribunal's many findings, say Labour. And here's the thing. Denis O'Brien owns 22% of this company. And the businessman spent €500 million amassing that stake in a company that's now worth a little over 100 million. Sources close to Denis O'Brien say it's business. He didn't like how the company was being managed by Gavin O'Reilly, and he wants change at the top. Independent News and Media shares closed up 6.5% this evening following the announcement. All the talk has been of Denis O'Brien making an outright bid for the company, but it remains unclear if he will, or even if he has to.
The big danger here, ultimately, is that if Denis O'Brien were to make a bid for INM, then the regulatory authorities, the competition authority, the government, whoever it is, could take a look at it and say, hang on a minute, we don't think that this is an appropriate level of media ownership. But if he doesn't make a bid, but grows his influence in a more indirect way, then you could see a situation where he's incredibly influential in the largest newspaper company in the country and is the largest owner of private radio media in the country. And there's not a lot that the regulatory authorities can do about it.
Denis O'Brien built up significant radio interests over the last decade and became as big in radio as Tony O'Reilly had been in the print media. But all of those situations changed when he began assembling his shareholding in Independent News and Media. This created a cross-media ownership issue, unlike any we'd seen in the Irish media before, and successive governments have funked dealing with it.
New media ownership legislation is on the way. It's an attempt by the government to ensure that too much media isn't in the hands of too few people. But given his involvement with the Moriarty Tribunal over that mobile phone licence, how would the government feel about Denis O'Brien making a play for the Independent News and Media group?
It's not relevant to bring the Moriarty Tribunal per se into the consideration about competition and ownership of the media. But I think regardless of any individual, and no matter how noble they were, whether it was the Lord himself or not, if they had total control of the media and total media dominance, would that be healthy? I don't think the Moriarty Tribunal in itself is relevant to this. This would happen whether we had a Moriarty Tribunal or not.
The fact that he has 22% of independent news and media and is the owner of the biggest independent radio stations in the country, in Today FM, News Talk and other regional stations as well, that gives him a scale of ownership in the Irish media which is unprecedented, and that is certainly a public policy issue, irrespective of anything that may have arisen out of the Moriarty Tribunal.
But it all raises questions. Who owns what? Who supplies the news? And just what is the Irish media landscape?
There's no question about it. The last 10 years has seen an increasing concentration of ownership into fewer and fewer hands. And Ireland would have, by European standards, a highly concentrated media market that is, a few companies owning more and more of the media.
We decided to create our own media map. Outside of RTE, there are 2 national and 31 licensed radio stations in Ireland. Many locally owned, but a number of big players are emerging, and none of them are bigger than Communicorp, owned by Denis O'Brien. It owns 2 national stations, Today FM and News Talk, and it's got stakes in 4 other regional stations. UTV owns 5 stations. Thomas Crosby Holdings has stakes in 4. It all means that 3 companies control half of the commercial radio stations.
We have a shrinking ownership now, particularly in radio area, and actually a lot of radio news content is coming from 2 or 3 main sources. Now, the prospect that that same source or that same newsroom, in a sense, being connected to our main newspaper publishing group, both for local and for national newspapers, I mean, you'd be blind not to see that there's an issue there that has to be looked at.
The print market is dominated by a number of large players. Independent News and Media owns 5 national titles and 13 regional papers. Rupert Murdoch's News International has 3 national titles here. Thomas Crosby Holdings, 3 national papers and 12 regionals. And Johnston Press has 14 regional titles. The state broadcaster RTE remains a massive player in the Irish media, a titan with major presence online, in television and in radio. But the events of today have focused attention on the commercial sector. The O'Reilly family have been a massive influence in Irish political and social life. It's a watershed day for the family, for the group, and for the greater Irish media.